That was Etude number 5 from Carcassi's Op.60 studies. And let's have a discussion and lesson on this work. Follow the lesson for free and just pick up all the tips from the video. But if you're interested, I do have a sheet music edition of all 25 etudes in Op.60, and there's a link for that in the description. So Etude number 5 is a little bit more involved than some of the previous etudes that have occurred so far, just in terms of there being more shapes to tackle. And depending on the tempo that you take, it can be quite challenging. At slower tempos, I would say the piece is fairly manageable for most intermediates. There's just one or two sections that need a little bit of extra work. But as you raise that tempo, all these shapes and you have to know them so well, and it does take a little bit of precision to get that down. So I think one thing you can do when you're playing this piece is you can just learn those shapes really well. And I would do that in two different ways. One way would be like learning the solid block shapes of those intervals at the beginning by playing them, two at a time in solid form. This helps you build muscle memory in the left hand to recognize the shapes. And so your hand really just knows what's coming all the time. So practicing the piece like that is very, very useful. And even in the other sections, when you get into these chords at measure 10, playing it as a chord and then you're just breaking it up in any way you can will just help you really learn the shapes in the left hand, which is just really needed. And I think that when you practice like that, it just speeds up the learning process quite a bit. Now, when you actually go to play the piece a little bit faster and a little bit more legato, then you can't necessarily rely on like block shapes like that. You must be just always getting the note that's coming next while holding previous notes. So instead of thinking in block shapes, we're kind of thinking fourth finger, second finger, third finger, first finger, just in order to get the next note and maximize your legato while connecting each, voice. So I would practice it in those two different ways, solid and then just really thinking in terms of getting the next note available for legato connection. And yeah, the other thing about this piece too is that although it sounds like it's all over the place a little bit, it's very traditional, right? It's like 4-measure phrases, very easily put together in that regard in terms of cadences and things. So once you get past like the nitty-gritty note by note or block by block, you can start thinking about where you want to take the phrase and letting it grow and a little bit of like rise and fall to it, and also just getting from point A to that cadence at the end of every 4 measures. So lots of ways to play and practice the piece. Nitty-gritty block forms, super legato, and then in terms of phrasing and momentum and dynamics and all those things. Okay, I think though that a majority of students will just have like more technical questions about how to manage the piece. So let's just do a walkthrough and we'll just point out a few things. For the most part, all of the sections that go through this kind of material, it's pretty straightforward, but there's some other sections to discuss. So through that section, as I've written on the score, I'm like IPM, so kind of alternating the upper fingers, but you can throw in A all the time. Like I do throw in A when the leap is large. So like PA, PM, PI, PM. Feel free to throw it in when the distance between the thumb and the upper note is large. Just as long as you're always going to be alternating. Even if you use just PI the whole time, that would be fine. That's alternating 2 fingers. But, including the other fingers is a good choice in this particular case. But don't worry about it too much. These little opportunities to grow the phrase to the cadence. Then you start again at measure 6. Measure 10 to measure 13 13 is going to be a little challenging for some students. If you're still working on your left-hand technique, just make sure that your knuckles are aligned with the fingerboard. Because like, look, if I try to get this chord and I'm misaligned, I can't even reach that bass note. But if I just swing that in and get everything aligned, it's not so bad, right? It's like easily reachable. I could even reach the other string. So it's all about hand alignment here. That section is a little bit tricky at faster tempos. At slow tempo, it's not so bad. I just recommend that you just really practice it to your destination points. And then like make sure that you're just really comfortable switching from one shape to the next, so that's really secure. And then you can deal with what comes afterwards, but you have to make sure that you can get those chords really solidly and in a relaxed way, so that, and then everything else afterwards, if you arrive safely, you will be able to play what comes after more naturally. If it's sketchy getting up to it and it's feeling kind of crazy, then it's just going to continue to deteriorate. So just make sure you really are able to arrive at those chords securely. Especially that one, it's kind of a weird move in some ways, but when you practice it in isolation, it's not that strange. But it's so destabilizing leading up to it that, like I said, just make sure you're arriving securely, and then everything else will come naturally. At the end of measure 13 there, I originally had fingered it to switch down to the second position, playing one D here and the next D here. But I don't really like that color change between switching from the third to the second strings, and even a little bit of intonation issues due to the action on the guitar. So I just ended up keeping it on the third string, since it's also like a little cadence there, so it's like you can kind of calm the tempo. It's not so much of a writ or rubato, but it's a calming of the tempo. Some good finger independence workouts in this piece. So yeah, I'm sweeping the thumb in measure 18. And then using the fingers. Sweep. Fingers. For the most part, you can like alternate after playing these chords. Like if you use P, M, and A at measure 22, for example, you can use I finger afterwards. And you just go through those and just work out like what fingers you're going to use to play the chord, and then what finger plays the next note. And because they're not 4-note chords, you are kind of lucky in that you have enough fingers to do that. What combination you use it's kind of up to you. You can decide what works best for each chord depending on how you feel about certain string spacings. But as long as you're just alternating through there, you'll be fine. Some of the fingerings that I've chosen just have to do with what comes before and what comes after in order to have free available fingers to jump into the next shape. Forzando. For the last chord, I actually sweep my thumb. If you're playing it solid, you can sweep your thumb over the bottom 3 strings, but I roll it because he's trying to be kind of grand there, and it's the last chord. This piece has, lots of kind of jumping little shapes, and lots of the use of the 4th finger on bass strings. So it's a really good finger independence workout, and compared to the previous etudes in the collection so far, a little bit more demanding in that way. Again, at slow tempos, not so difficult, but as you raise it up, you just need to make sure you're actually maintaining good hand positions the whole time. Otherwise, I think for some students, if their left hand positioning isn't worked out very well, I think they'll be like trying to correct all the time to grab these chords, as opposed to just being able to play through it and just get what you need as you play, right? You don't want to have to be jumping into shapes, never jumping into shapes, just small movements with your fingers, like extension of the fingers to grab little shapes. So that's part of the challenge. And you might feel that the right hand fingering is a challenge at first in this piece, but you'll actually find that it's all very logical, and just alternation as a principle guides you the whole time. I could have written in tons of right hand fingering, but it's kind of silly. There's so many choices that you could use. Whatever you use is kind of okay, as long as you're applying those concepts of alternating fingers and free fingers to it. So really great workout piece, a piece that I never looked at too much before doing the full collection, and but now it's one of my favorites. It's so active, and it's such a great little etude to work out some issues in your playing. It's also just kind of fun and enjoyable too, so I hope you enjoy it.